edition. I am your host, Jeffrey Anderson. Joining me once again, Sam Merriam. Sam, how are you doing, man? How was your Easter?
I'm doing well, man. What better way to go live after the Sam Darnold trade? Been a pretty good weekend. Went to dog sit for the week and got to see my grandma. It was pretty good, man. How was yours?
It was great. I didn't do any dog sitting, unfortunately, but I was back home with the family, and we hope that all of you out there listening had a great Easter as well. Hope you all stayed safe, all that good stuff. So today on the show, we're going to be talking, obviously, the Sam Darnold trade just happened. It kind of signals something that I think Sam wasn't looking forward to, but I was. We'll be talking about that. We also got picks 11 through 20, teams 11 through 20. Bit of a shakeup there as well. If you heard at the tail end of our last episode, we sort of caught it. We'll talk about the 49ers trade, as well as the Dolphins trade, the Eagles trade a little bit when we get into teams 11 through 20. And we'll just go from there. So let's just start off with pick number 11, that being the Giants. These guys were busy this offseason. I think everybody considers them to be winners. They got Kenny Galladay, a fast, top-tier receiver in the NFL. They also signed Adoree Jackson from the Titans, and they also made a couple other signings as well. Sam, what did you think of the Giants' offseason, the direction they went in terms of these signings that they made?
So I believe they cut Golden Tate as well. I want to say I think he's still a free agent. You'd mentioned Adoree Jackson, and Logan Ryan. I had a feeling Logan Ryan was, or at least probably did recruit him because they had played together, in Tennessee. Kenny Galladay, obviously a great signing, and like I was listening to a, first draft podcast with Field Yates, Mel Kiper Jr. and Todd McShay last week, and Todd McShay hit that right on the money when he's saying that Daniel Jones has no excuses now, and they also signed Kyle Rudolph and Evan Ingram. Potential, I think quite a few years ago, Evan Ingram was top 5 talented tight end in the NFL. And I don't think we've went through this before, but in my opinion, other than the quarterback position, tight end, arguably the toughest position to learn in the NFL. Because if you think about it, out of 32 teams in the NFL, yeah, like the past year or two, you're starting to see more tight ends come around. But there were years when it was just Gronk and Travis Kelce, not a ton. And now you're seeing guys like Darren Waller, Mark Andrews, Robert Tonyan Jr. And I'm excited to go through this draft because I got an interesting one for them. But yeah, I mean, I like it. I think their offseason went very, very well. They did lose Kevin Zeitler to the Baltimore Ravens. I believe was it in free agency? I didn't think they cut
Yep,
him.
it was in free agency. I think they let him walk.
Yeah. And they were close to not signing Kyle Rudolph because he had an injury. Then, if I'm not mistaken, he either pushed back the surgery, or it was a miscommunication or something. But they were very close to letting that contract fall through, to letting that deal was up in the air for a while, for a few days, until they finally decided to do it. And then I think I want to say Kyle Rudolph accepted to agreed to have the surgery. Well, yeah, I think their season's going very well, or their off season's going very well. They're sitting at the 11th pick. They're sitting in a really nice position, and we talked about this with I think the Eagles last week. As soon as we had the trade, actually, as soon as we went off the air, Eagles Dolphins trade happened. So I like I like the direction the Giants are going. I'm not gonna say I was impressed with Joe Judge because they almost made the playoffs and they were in wild card contention with a sub 500 record. I think Joe Judge and the direction he's taking that team is going in the right direction. I'm not gonna say after 1 year I've been impressed with Joe Judge, but the team, he's got a lot of promise, and I think Todd McShay nailed it right there when I was listening to his pod last week. When Daniel Jones doesn't have any excuses anymore. This he has Kenny Galladay's his wide receiver 1. His 2 is Sterling Shepard. His 3 is Darius Slayton. And he's got a solid tight end duo. Kyle Rudolph's getting up there in age. I would assume he's going to be the guy, to kind of learn, or for Evan Ingram to kind of learn off of, because it's obviously going to be Evan Ingram. But the tough part is Evan Ingram has to stay healthy.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest question mark with Evan Ingram. Always kind of has been that and his drops. But I think with Kyle Rudolph there, that's not as much of an issue. And you're right, Daniel Jones now. I think a lot of teams with these young quarterbacks should look at the situation, and I think they should try to copy it. I think Miami is another place that should try to copy this sort of formula where you surround Daniel Jones or Tua or your young quarterback, whoever, with all of these weapons, and then he runs out of excuses. As you said, Kenny Galladay is a number 1, Shepard in the slot, Slayton on the outside, and the other side with Kyle Rudolph and Evan Ingram and Saquon Barkley returning. That is a very good offense. Their line does need work, but we'll talk about that with the pick. But yeah, I think Daniel Jones, this is it for him. Like this is a make or break year for Daniel Jones. I've been of the opinion, I'm not crazy about Daniel Jones. He's been okay, sort of, kind of, not really. I really don't know what to say about the guy, and I guess next year we'll see what happens with him. But going to this pick now, there's a couple of areas where they could look to improve. I think the offensive line is probably their biggest weakness. They did let Kevin Zeitler go. They did just draft Andrew Thomas last year at the tackle spot. Kind of disappointed last year, but it was only his first year, and this team is still kind of rebuilding. That's okay. And they could also use a little work on the edge spot. So where do you think that they should go with this first pick that they have?
So my interesting pick was going to be Kyle Pitts, but I had totally forgot that they had signed Kyle Rudolph. And I think there's a strong possibility that Kyle Pitts will go in the top 10. But my interesting pick here is Elijah Vera Tucker out of USC. You had mentioned they lost Kevin Zeitler. And what better replacement than arguably the best guard in the draft? I think Elijah Vera Tucker is a better offensive line prospect than Austin Jackson was in the 2020 draft coming out of USC. Teams love Miami Dolphins, obviously, were the ones that drafted him last year. Teams loved Austin Jackson's upside. And, I think teams are going to fall in love. I think the Giants will fall in love with the versatility of Elijah Vera Tucker. He's athletic. The one knock on him is, he doesn't have the best vision. There are times, I had written an article on the Cards Wire, back in October about him. If you look at his matchup against USC, or against Utah, excuse me, in 2019, it was a little bit of inconsistency. He didn't get comfortable playing. He didn't get comfortable until late in the game. He let guys with elite speed run through him with ease. He's quick. He needs to develop that vision to peel off onto other opponents to get to his assignments more efficiently. So you don't see a ton of bull rushing either. So he's quick, and I think we just need to see a little bit more from him. But he is absolutely. I think he's worthy of going in the top 15, and I think the Giants would be a perfect fit for him.
Totally, I agree with that 100%. Elijah Vera Tucker, definitely the best guard prospect, I would say, in this draft. Like you said, he does need a little bit of work, but who doesn't? And they did just draft Andrew Thomas, and they also have Nate Solder as well, who has just kind of been a rock for them. They could look potentially to replace him. So if he falls to them, they could also look at Rashawn Slater, who for now they could slot inside at that guard spot.
It'd be a really nice pick too.
Yeah, that'd be, I think, if he could fall to them, I think that would be a home run, knock it out of the park pick for the Giants. I'm really hoping, honestly, that happens. We'll see what the direction goes with this top 10 in terms of Rashawn Slater and where teams value him at. It'll be really interesting to see where Rashawn Slater ends up, and I do think that he'd be a perfect fit for this team. because he can start at guard day one for them for sure.
Yeah, I agree totally. And, I think if they're looking for a lineman, they need to look for a versatile prospect. And you had mentioned Andrew Thomas. His draft stock was interesting because after the 2019 draft, he was already seen as this top five, top 10 prospect. And then he fell because you started seeing all of these other tackles like Tristan Wirfs, Jedrick Wills Jr., Mekhi Becton really showing out. And then the night before the draft, his stock went right up to where it was before, after the 2019 draft. And he went number 4. And a lot of people thought it was the reach. Not a lot of people like his upside. Um, and, he did struggle a bit for his rookie year. I would say of the first round tackles, he was probably the one that struggled the most and had the least, probably had the worst season out of all of the first round tackles from the 2020 draft. But if Rashawn Slater could get there, I think Slater's a top 10 prospect. I think he could go as early as 5 to the Cincinnati Bengals. If Sewell's off the board, or I think Cincinnati can even afford trading down. The Falcons and Lions came out today. Like they came out today and said the Falcons and Lions are considering trading down. So the Falcons went from being very, very high on Kyle Pitts at 4, and now they're considering trading down. And the Panthers trade, which we have yet to discuss. A lot of things shaking up in the draft, and we are almost a little over 3 weeks out of the draft. So yeah, I think offensive lineman has to be one of their top priorities. Again, if you're looking for another edge rusher one, you and I had this conversation, Jeff, off the air of who the edge rusher one prospect is. I think you had saw one that said put Jalen Phillips. I also saw one that a guy put Jalen Phillips as an edge rusher one. I let Quiddy pay at 11, but Kevin Zeitler, they let Kevin Zeitler walk, and Kevin Zeitler, to me, that's a huge loss. And I think Vera Tucker, if he's there, Rashawn Slater, if he's there, would be a very, very nice replacement.
Yeah, and as you were saying with Andrew Thomas, I mean the guys who were drafted after him: Jedrick Wills, Mekhi Becton, Tristan Wirfs, and they drafted him so high as well. So
Mm-hmm.
if he doesn't pan out, especially with how good those 3 names already are in the NFL, especially Tristan Wirfs, who had just an unbelievable season last year with the
Yeah.
Bucks, it'll be very interesting to see how people look back on that pick of Andrew Thomas. And then at edge, yeah, I saw Brett Coleman had put Jalen Phillips as his edge one. I think this edge class is very interesting, as in the past, with the Bosa brothers, guys like that, we've seen there's always sort of been an alpha number one clear cut edge guy leading the
Mm-hmm.
draft. And this year, there really isn't. You look at different draft sites, you see Kwity Paye number one, you see Gregory Rousseau at number one, Jason Owe
Even to
even
see a
up
Z
there.
Solskjaer too, and I
Azeez
think that's rightfully
Ojulari.
so.
There are so many different guys at the number one spot. So I think it just depends on if the Giants, for some reason, don't want to go linemen. It depends on who they like the best out of that group. I would think that Kwity Paye would be the best for them,
Yep.
just because of his versatility as well. We saw him get moved around a bunch at Michigan. He can play a bunch of different spots. Super versatile guy. And I think that's sort of the coin term here for the Giants is versatility. Whatever spot they end up going, I think versatility, getting a guy to play around the field a little bit, to be flexible with where he goes. I think that's sort of the formula for how they should go about it.
And before we move on to the Eagles, which is going to be really interesting, but you bring up versatility. If they were to choose offensive line, you could go second round edge, and this isn't a deep edge rusher class. And as soon as you said versatility with edge in the second round, I think you could have guys like Jason Owe there potentially, even Joseph Osai. Osai starting to fall because he's a very raw prospect. One guy that my co-host from Saturday Standouts have been talking about is Ronnie Perkins from
Yeah.
Oklahoma, and right now, I think he's fit for an edge, but you've seen him play on the inside. So I'm very curious to see what his primary position ends up being. And, take the Raiders, for example. The Raiders drafted Cleveland Farrell 2 years ago. They signed Yannick in free agency, and now it's looking like Cleveland Farrell's going to move on to the inside and play interior. So I mean that you can potentially see that out of Ronnie Perkins, which would be interesting. Or they decided to keep him on the edge. But that's a draft riser, and I think he deserves to be in the conversation of a early second round pick, in my opinion. But yeah.
Totally. All right. So now let's move off the Giants and get to what was the pretty much the story of the week, I would say, of last week. So 49ers went up to number 3, and the Dolphins moved down initially to number 12, but then made this trade with the Eagles, and they're now at number 6. And so Philly is down to 12. Now, I had been hearing reports that they were trying to move up to number 3 to potentially get a crack at Zach Wilson. But since they weren't guaranteed that spot, or they weren't going to be guaranteed Zach Wilson, it appears that what they've done here is they've sort of folded their cards and they're moving back later in the draft because whoever they wanted at 6, clearly they thought that they could get him at this number 12 spot. And I mean, let's face it, the Eagles need a lot of different guys right now, but I think that the person that they're targeting here at the spot is a Micah Parsons, Jalen Waddle, potentially a Devontae Smith if they wanted to go that route. Even a corner they could go here. They have a lot of different options. Where do you think they're going to go with this?
So, and I don't know if you've ever had conversations with Darius. And I want to bring this up, and I think it's very interesting. And you remember the Carson Wentz trade back a few months back. If Carson Wentz, like the Eagles now have 2 first-round picks, but if Carson Wentz plays 75% of his snaps, they get 3 first-round picks. And we don't need to talk too in depth about this, but he wants Russell Wilson. And there's reports Russell Wilson complained about his protection. If he had better protection, I think the Seahawks they would have had a much better chance of beating the Rams. But Russell Wilson, I don't think he's never had good protection. And
No.
I think the offensive line position, one, they reach for every first round player they've picked since Rashad Penny. Two, the offensive line position, in my opinion, I think the Seahawks have. That's been one of the areas Seattle's refused to address early. And now you go look at the Eagles. If they trade for Russell Wilson, that would be insane. But going back to their draft pick, you had mentioned Micah Parsons. If Micah Parsons falls, which I think he will, out of the top 10, based on his character, his off field issues. I shouldn't say character. I should say his maturity. And we had talked about that last week when we had talked about the Lions, even the Broncos too. I think they have to go receiver. This is a deep wide receiver class, so I think even going Micah Parsons, they could afford to wait for a wide receiver. But I think if you got a guy like Jalen Waddle there, you have to go with Jalen Waddle because I don't think Jamar Chase is going to be there. I'd be a little bit surprised if he is. I'd be surprised if Chase falls out of the top 10 at this point. But let's say Micah Parsons is off the board and Jamar Chase. There's 2 guys that I'm looking at. One of them's on offense, and that is Jalen Waddle. And the other one is a linebacker out of Notre Dame by the name of Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who I think is the second best linebacker in the draft, and I think he's a top 15 prospect in this draft. And when you think about the Eagles, they don't have a true linebacker. TJ Edwards, linebacker out of Wisconsin, he's not a true linebacker. They have had rotational linebackers. None of them have performed up to their true potential. If they get Owusu-Koramoah out of Notre Dame, that is their defensive piece to build around. Or even Jalen Waddle now too, because Alshon Jeffrey got cut. I personally think if Waddle and Smith are both on the board, which I think is a strong possibility, they have to go Waddle. Because Devontae Smith is undersized. People have talked about that now, but they already have a guy like Devontae Smith, an undersized guy. They have Jalen Reagor, and they have speed. They need another big-bodied guy with elite acceleration and yards after catch monster, and that's Jalen Waddle.
It is. Jalen Waddle is that guy for sure. Back real quick to the JOK pick. One other thing that the Eagles really seemed to be good at last year was having a terrible secondary. And Owusu Koromoa is amazing as a coverage linebacker. So I think having that extra cog in the machine to be able to take some pressure off of those corners, not Slay, but whoever their other corner is at this point in time, I don't even know his name. But I think Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah offers interesting flexibility at that spot as well, where maybe on later passing downs you don't have to take him out of the game, and you can leave him in there as a true 3-down linebacker. But in terms of wide receiver, I definitely think that Jalen Waddle is better than Devontae Smith as a prospect. He's, as we've said, bigger, the more physical guy. And I think, barring that broken ankle that he had last year, I think he would be right up there with Jamar Chase. Not quite to his level, but I think he'd be in the conversation as wide receiver 1 in this class. So it'll be interesting to see where the Eagles go with this spot. Now, I just want to touch briefly, because there was some mix-up. We were supposed to talk about the 49ers here. Obviously, they are now at pick number 3, and I think it's pretty obvious where they're going to go at pick number 3.
Yeah, and I think it's Trey Lance. I think I had mentioned Justin Fields. I think it's Trey Lance, and I'm curious to see what you think, who you think it's going to be.
Okay, so I think so. It's an interesting conversation with Jimmy G still there, because I do think that here's what I think that they should do. I think they should keep Jimmy G there for this year. And if you're going to do that, take Trey Lance.
Yes.
Because I think Trey Lance's upside is higher than what Justin Fields is. Now, do I think Justin?
I agree.
Do I think Justin Fields is a bad prospect? I don't think so. He's definitely got some work in terms of his progressions. He can sometimes get stuck on those reads. And I know some people have also talked about his throwing mechanics, but I don't think that's that big of an issue. It seems to work for him. But Trey Lance is just, he's got so much upside. That raw talent, that big cannon of an arm that those guys who go to North Dakota State seem to have. And I mean, let's face it, they have Kyle Shanahan as their coach, right? He took Jimmy G took them to a Super Bowl with this roster, which is pretty much the same.
I mean, so Jimmy G took them to the Super Bowl.
I'm not saying that Jimmy G. I'm saying they went to a Super Bowl with Jimmy G, on this roster.
That's a better way to put it. Yeah,
that's what I mean by that. So honestly, between Justin Fields and Trey Lance, I don't think it matters who they draft, because I think that no matter what, that guy in year 2 is going to be better than Jimmy G has been at San Francisco. I think the whole NFC needs to watch out next year for San Francisco. They are going to be a dangerous perennial Super Bowl threat.
Oh, absolutely. And, the NFC West is completely wide open. And, I think after the Rams traded for Stafford, a lot of people thought the Rams were instantly divisional title. And, the Cardinals, who I think Cliff Kingsbury's on the hot seat. I never thought that was a good hire. He didn't have the strongest coaching resume, in my opinion. He coached Pat Mahomes at Texas Tech. He was hired as the OC at USC, and then took the job as the Cardinals head coach. But now you bring in J.J. Watt, then you sign A.J. Green, which clearly tells me that you don't believe in Christian Kirk as your reliable second option, which I don't think he is either. And the Niners, fully healthy, and you'd mentioned keeping Jimmy G. A quarterback at 3, seems very likely. And no matter who they're taking, I think they absolutely need to take. They absolutely need to keep Jimmy Garoppolo. They have 2 years left of Garoppolo's contract, and there's a big reason why his name is popping up as a cut candidate for the Niners is because his dead cap is only 2.4 million.
Yep.
And next year, or I think that's what it was. And next year it's 1.8. So the dead cap his next 2 years is very, very low, I guess, for the Niners and Jimmy G's contract. And you had mentioned if Nick Bosa was not or was hurt, the Niners Nick Bosa took them to the Super Bowl. When Nick Bosa was a strong factor in them making the Super Bowl. Um, but one, whoever's drafted there is going to succeed with Kyle Shanahan as their head coach. And two, that just goes to show is you don't need an elite quarterback. The Niners specifically don't need an elite quarterback, as well as the Green Bay Packers, to win football games and to be a deep playoff team and potentially a contender. And I think they're two pieces away. I think the Super Bowl team they were 2 years ago, I don't think they're as strong. I think they're an offensive line away, especially a corner away from being, legit contenders. I think contending, you can potentially put them up there right now. I think they overpaid on Trent Williams for that extension, but yeah.
Yeah, the Niners, I think no matter what they do at that spot, I think they're going to be in good hands because now, because next year I think Jimmy G's got to go, because they're picking quarterback here. They basically just reset, and now they get 5 cheap years of quarterback play, and that's
Mm-hmm.
pretty much 5 Super Bowl years, I think, for the 49ers. So let's then go and talk a little bit about Miami moving down. So they were number 3 and they moved down to number 12, but then they decided they wanted to go back up to number 6. And this is an interesting spot for them because they're right below the Bengals, who could potentially take Penei Sewell, who I think that they would have been taking at number 3, but the Bengals could also be taking Jamar Chase. So I think that pretty much whichever guy is left on the board there, I think they're going to take. Maybe not Jamar Chase because I think they do have bigger needs at line, but I think it'd be very hard for them to at least ignore the factor of taking Chase at number 6 if he's available.
Yeah, I don't understand why the Bengals would take Jamar Chase at number 5. Yes, you reunite him with his former quarterback Joe Burrow, and Joe Burrow's trying to recruit Jamar Chase. They need Penei Sewell. And I agree with you, Jeff. I think if Penei Sewell falls to 6, you have to take him. And I think it is one of those guys, and I think 6 can potentially turn into best player available for the Dolphins.
Yeah, I think that's probably what I would do if I were in their situation. Because other than like their line, I don't think they have like terribly glaring needs. You can maybe get some help on the pass rush side of things, but you can also do that later in the draft. And I do think, this is a pretty deep line class as well. So I think that they could get a guy, even with that number 18 pick. So I think that taking Jamar Chase here, and then later on at pick 18, potentially taking a tackle prospect would be their best bet.
Yeah, and I think they also do need they need a true linebacker because I don't think a lot of people expected Andrew Van Ginkel to get cut. The future of the wide receiver room is also in question. Devontae Parker I think is good. I don't think he has done enough to be a true wide receiver one. I keep forgetting Jakeem Grant or Albert Wilson. One of them opted out. I think it was Albert Wilson. And maybe it might have been Jakeem Grant that got the extension. Um, Will Fuller is only on a 1 year deal. So the long term future of this wide receiver room is in question. The depth of the running back position is in question. I think Myles Gaskin is solid. I don't think they can go wrong drafting one of these running backs in the first 2 rounds, but I think they need to go sign one on the market. And I was talking to, I don't remember who I was talking to earlier today. Oh, one of my cousins, James Conner to the Miami Dolphins. James Conner is still he's still a free agent. The Steelers let him walk, and we'll get to the Steelers, I believe, next week. But I think the Dolphins have pieces, but I think with the roster now, they can absolutely be competitive for a playoff team for a playoff spot.
Totally. And another question mark, this is a similar Daniel Jones situation with Tua, right? I think, the Justin Herbert pick, it kind of was a slap in the face to Miami with how well he has performed, at least in that first year, at the Chargers. And I mean, Tua, I think, has always been a guy where he's going to have needed help in whatever situation he went to. But I think with them bringing in Will Fuller, you have that deep threat down the field, Devontae Parker, who I think is more of like a B+ player than like an A-.
Yeah, I
I would
agree with
say
that.
like he's like like a B1 type of
I wouldn't
guy.
even go say solid B. Like,
He's like a solid B. Yeah, like A- on a good day, kind of like B+, B average, I would say for him. So yeah, why not shore up that wide receiver room with Jamar Chase? One of the best wide receiver prospect in this draft. I think pretty consensually as well. So then let's move across the country here and let's go to the team who picked Justin Herbert last year, that being the Chargers at number 13. So this offseason, they made what crushed me as a Packers fan, the signing, and they got Corey
yep.
Linsley.
It's two former Packers linemen they took from us.
Yeah, Balaga and Linsley.
Yep.
And then they also took Hayward a couple years back from us as well.
Yep. And now
Casey
he's
Hayward.
cut.
Yeah, he's cut as well. So I think for the Chargers, we just talked about Casey Hayward being cut, so they could potentially look at a corner here. I don't think there'll be many options left, but I also don't think that they should go corner here. I think they're better off going offensive line. Brian Balaga, for as good as he is, I was actually glad when the Packers let him walk. He had too many injuries. He was always on the sidelines. And for a contending team, that's not what you need. And he's also 32 years old, getting up there a little bit. Corey Linsley signing helps out the interior a lot. So why not get a guy on the outside to really solidify this offensive line and get Justin Herbert a little more time to throw back there, even though with his legs and his off-platform throwing, I don't think he needs the help all that much. But obviously, I think if Rashawn Slater's there, that's perfect for them because he can also kick inside to guard if you need him to. After that, though, because let's just say Slater is taken at 11 from the Giants, who I really like. After that, they've got some options. So they could go with who is pretty much Brian Balaga Jr. and Tevin Jenkins, super violent player out of Oklahoma State. I just watched Brett Coleman uploaded a video on him the other day on his YouTube channel talking about Tevin Jenkins, just this monster, just violent man when it comes to blocking. They could also go Christian Darrisaw out of Virginia Tech. A little raw, played down to his competition a little bit, but everything is there in terms of the physical traits for Christian Darrisaw. So where do you think that the Chargers should go here? Or if you think it's at the line, who do you think they should take?
So I fully agree with you, Jeff. They have to go offensive line. And if they're looking at corner, Pat Surtain might be there. But this is a deep secondary class. There's also a deep tackle class. And let's even assume that Rashawn Slater and Elijah Vera Tucker are off the board. I love the Tevin Jenkins pick, but I'm going to go with the other pick that you had mentioned, and that's Christian Darrisaw. I think outside of Kadarius Toney, I think he's one of the biggest offensive draft prospect risers in the country this past season. He's athletic, he's explosive, and this is a guy that excels as a run blocker. I'd have to pick up his stats during like his PFF stats during the season. His pass blocking grade, I want to say, was in the 80s and 90s for both pass and run blocking. So he excels on both areas as a run and pass blocker, and they need to protect their quarterback. Justin Herbert's their guy. I understand it's only been 1 year, but he showed a lot of promise after 1 year, and even signing Chase Daniel. And the Lions were shopping Chase Daniel because Chase Daniel was known to be a good mentor for the younger quarterbacks, like Justin Herbert. So I fully agree with you, Jeff. They have to go offensive line here. I think all the guys you named is good. are very, very nice fits. Obviously, Rashawn Slater would be the first one. I would even go Vera Tucker at 2, Darisaw at 3. Tevin Jenkins is a lot of fun to watch in the run game. He might be one of, if not the best offensive tackle in the run game. Um, because of his speed. Honestly, I would love him at 29 in the Green Bay Packers if he's there.
Yeah, we'll see if he's there. Fingers crossed kind of situation. I really don't know what the Packers are going to do in general. We'll talk about them in the last stint of this next week, but they're a head case for fans like you and I.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and move on across state lines from the Packers to the Vikings. The Vikings, I don't really know what they did this offseason. They just kind of stayed put. They was it their safety, Anthony Harrison, I believe. He's
Anthony
off
Harris
to
is the
the
Eagle.
Eagles.
Yep.
Yeah. Other than that,
They signed Patrick Peterson. I think that was their
that's
big
right.
one.
They did sign
So,
Patrick Peterson. That's like their
and
big sign,
actually, I'm not
I
sure
think.
if you read earlier today, but Jeff Gladney turned himself in on an assault charge, and he's
Did
got a
he?
$10,000 bond on him. So, he might be off that team. They don't have a depth at all. They needed Patrick Peterson. Um, so in terms of draft, we want to talk that first, and seeing as they outside of Patrick Peterson, they kind of did have a quiet, off season. Um, Pat Surtain here. I like Kwity Paye a lot here. Daniil Hunter might hold out. Daniil Hunter had a neck injury that sidelined him for the season last year. They don't have any edge depth, and I think Kwity Paye would be an absolute monster here. I wouldn't like it as a Packer fan, but Kwity Paye would be
Yeah.
unbelievable on the Vikings.
I think that they have to go defensive line in some sort here. Their pressures last year, like it was awful. They didn't get any pressure on quarterbacks whatsoever. They could potentially go offensive line here if they wanted to, but I think that the bigger issue is at that defensive position. And this might be a little bit of a reach, but they could potentially, if they wanted to, go for a guy like Christian Barmore at this spot.
Hmm.
He is, I think, valued a little later in this round. I would say like pick 20 to 30. I could see Christian Barmore, going in, but the dude is a freak. And I think that he would be great on the interior to get some pressure going for this Vikings team that desperately needs that.
Yeah, they lost Linval Joseph, gained Michael Pierce, and especially for a team like you just mentioned, they don't have any depth on their interior, and this D line class is not deep at all. So I'd be curious to see which players or which NFL teams go after D line in the first 2 rounds, because after Barmore, it's kind of a big drop down. I would say Barmore 1. My number 2 is Levi Wunzurike, who I can still see going in the first round. Jay Tafel opted out. There's Jalen Twyman, who opted out of Pitt. There's potential gems like Jalen Twyman, in my opinion, who I think is going to be an early day 3 pick. But Barmore wouldn't be bad either, especially when you got Rick Spielman, so I can totally see a reach here.
Yeah. I don't know. It's really hard to see them taking, especially because Barmore, I think, is polished enough to start for them.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing with this edge class, right? Is we got a lot of physical freaks here. There's not a lot of guys, or there's a couple guys who you could say are like ready day one, but on a team like the Vikings, Mike Zimmer expects you to compete, and they're expected to contend every single year. So I'm not sure who they would take here as far as an edge player. I think if Kwity Paye falls to them, I think they could. I don't think he will fall to them. I think he's going to go higher, but I think I would like that pick here as well. You could potentially look at a guy like Azeez Ojulari, or depending on
Gregory
how high you
Rousseau.
are on Jason Owe as
Mm-hmm.
well, physical freak. So they could go a lot of different directions here, but I think whatever direction they go, it's got to be to get some pressure on that quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
So then let's move on to New England now, who has pick number 15. So New England was very busy this offseason, as we saw. They had a lot of cap space to spend, and spend it they did. They brought in Matt Judon, Kendrick Bourne, Nelson Aguilar. I mean, the list just goes on and on of guys they signed this offseason. They brought back Cam Newton. So but there still is that question mark of should they go Mac Jones if he's available here? I'm not 100% sure that they should, not because I don't think Mac would be a reach for them at 15, but because they gave Cam that 1 year extension, I think they should at least try to go all in for this year. And I think Bill Belichick wants to go all in because that's how Bill Belichick is. He doesn't like losing. So, where's some spots you could see him going with this pick?
Yeah, they need a franchise quarterback, and I like Mac Jones here, especially if he gets to work with Bill Belichick. And now that they have Cam Newton for a year, another year, they have to get that bridge quarterback. And I'm curious to see who it is, but I'm going to go with the corner in here. I'm going to go with Pat Surtain. I'm a little bit confused why Pat Surtain keeps falling. Had a solid pro day. I'm not sure. I don't think he had any injuries. So I guess it has to do with, team needs and which teams value the corners more than others. I'm going to go with Pat Surtain here, especially since, Stephon Gilmore, they've been shopping him for quite some time now.
Yeah. Yeah, he's been shopped for like every year you seem to hear Gilmore's name,
Hmm.
in the trade market. So it's curious too because Gilmore is, I mean, he's pretty good. You've seen, but he is getting up there in age, so it is a good thing I think for them to at least look at the corner position. It is a clear need for them, I would say, outside of Gilmore. And it doesn't hurt to have corner depth in the NFL when you pretty much are playing nickel as your base defense nowadays, anyway.
Yeah, I fully agree. And you had mentioned from a fantasy perspective, this is a little bit upsetting that they got Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith.
Yeah,
I was hoping one of those guys would go to the Jaguars, which, we'll get to next week, it looks like, with their second pick. But yeah.
yeah, it was crazy because we know Bill Belichick loves his tight ends, but I think he might love them a little too much, getting both Henry and Smith. But let's move on to one of your teams now, the Arizona Cardinals. I expect you to completely dissect the Cardinals here and just go completely in on them. So why don't you let me know what they've been up to this free agency? Update us all.
So Jeff had said, for those that don't know, I write for the Cards Wire, had alluded to that a few picks ago. And this, like I had mentioned, Cliff Kingsbury, I never thought that was a good hire. He's going on the hot seat. They went out and signed J.J. Watt and shocked a lot of people. And, I think signing J.J. Watt makes the draft a whole lot easier, especially for how they want to approach it. They also traded their third round pick for Rodney Hudson in a seventh. So they went from five draft picks to they have a first and a second, and they don't pick until the fifth round. They have a first, a second, a fifth, a sixth, and two sevenths. They also signed AJ Green, who, like I said before, Steve Keim also came out and said AJ Green is still great. He still has great film to show. He's on a 1 year, I don't want to say prove it deal because he certainly proved that he is an elite wide receiver. He has had injury concerns. They let Kenyon Drake walk to the Raiders, who actually, if I'm not mistaken, I think the Raiders came out like a week or two ago and said they're going to try him out at wide receiver. I had written an article. I encourage you all to go check it out. It was during the season. If Chase Edmonds should be considered, I shouldn't even say considered, should Chase Edmonds be the starting running back in 2021? Now, they could still go edge. Even in the first round. I don't agree with it, but they could still go edge in the first round. I would even wait until the second. I think they have to go corner, especially since they just lost Patrick Peterson, who I think it definitely did make sense for them to let him walk. They also let Hassan Reddick walk to the Carolina Panthers, which we had talked about last week. Their run game. So, we've had multiple conversations about this, and in terms of the value of running backs, Travis Etienne came out and said during his pro day, my RB1, that he wants to play for the Arizona Cardinals. And one pick that I absolutely love, he was my, CB4, I think, coming into the season. I had Sean Wade above him, but
Oof, yeah. Sean Wade did not have the
Sean Wade's
best
a
of
big,
seasons.
yeah. Um, the guy that I'm looking at is J.C. Horn, a guy that blew up his pro day. He's the second best corner in the draft, especially with injury concerns now with Caleb Farley. And this might be a this I don't think this is bold at all. J.C. Horn might be the first corner off the board in 3 weeks before Pat Surtain. And I'm talking top 10. I'm talking Dallas Cowboys early. But if J.C. Horn is there at 16, even Pat Surtain, but I like J.C. Horn here better. J.C. Horn would be a monster for the Cardinals. 6'1", 205. He opted out like halfway through the season, and he's gone up against elite targets. He went up against Seth Williams. Um, Seth Williams was targeted 11 times throughout that game this past season, and he only caught 4 targets. He also went up against Kyle Pitts, and we talked corners last week, and one of the most crucial traits that is very, very beneficial for the NFL in corners is hip mobility. And I think J.C. Horn, I wouldn't say has the best, and I'm looking at Greg Newsome for that one. I think J.C. Horn still has one of the best hip mobilities, and his speed and his ability to keep up with those wide receivers, um, wide receiver slash tight end, I guess, like Kyle Pitts. But I think J.C. Horn would be an unbelievable fit here.
Last year, for the games that I did watch for the Cardinals, because they had a lot of primetime games last year, one thing that they lacked was an identity of some sort. They felt soft to me. J.C. Horn would completely change that. This dude seems like he's on rabies every time he steps on the field. I mean, the guy he's across from, you better hope you take some painkillers after the game because he beats players up. He is the most physical corner in this class. He might be the best man corner in this class. You can have that debate between Surtain and Horn, depending on who you like better as a man corner. But he is a guy that would ignite some fire into this team, especially on the defensive side. And to have him and Budda Baker feeding off of each other on the same team, that would be scary. And then you can have a guy, because he did have a lot of penalties last year, and he was a little ill-disciplined here and there. To have a guy like Malcolm Butler on the other side of him to potentially coach him, that veteran presence to sort of calm him down, keep him in check when he needs to be. I think this is one of my favorite fits in the entire draft.
Yeah, I fully agree, and this is one of those picks where it's just a match made in heaven. And Malcolm Butler, 1 year deal, basically 1 year prove it. I think he's overrated in my opinion, but I think this deal can potentially give him a chance to, prove that he still can be a very very highly productive corner. They still have Byron Murphy, and they still signed Robert Alford, which I was a little bit surprised by due to his injury concerns. They signed Dre Kirkpatrick last year to a 1 year deal. I believe he's now a free agent. And they signed Budda Baker during the season. So J.C. Horn, I agree, Jeff. Match made in heaven, and his penalty issues were definitely a concern as well. And that comes with time, and it also comes with mentoring and coaching. And I'm very very impressed with what Vance Joseph has done throughout the season or from the defense. 2 years ago, I want to say they were one of the worst defenses in the NFL, like 28 to 32, and he brought them up to like top they were like 14, I think.
Yeah, they were definitely a lot better this past year with Vance Joseph. He's done very good work for them. So that's the Cardinals. Once again, if you missed it, go check out Sam. He writes for the Cards Wire. He does good stuff there. Let's move on now to the Raiders, to John Gruden. They had one of the worst, if not the worst, offseason. I mean, I can't help but laugh at the decisions they made. They let Rodney Hudson go for pretty much nothing. The other guy on their line, why does his name escape me? They let somebody else go on that line, or they traded him. Was it their tackle? I really can't. I can't think right now, but I don't know. But either way, they brought in Kenyon Drake, which that's fine, but you already have Josh Jacobs there. And otherwise, they didn't really do a whole lot else to improve their team. So the Raiders have a lot of needs on this team now. All of a sudden, they have needs at offensive line, at least in the interior, with Rodney Hudson being gone at least. But I think 17, at least for these centers, for the interior linemen, I think that's a little high. You could also look at the cornerback position. They were absolutely abysmal in the secondary last year. Jonathan Abram did not look very good last year, and they were playing the guy who signed with the Patriots, I think, LaMarcus Joyner, out of position the entire time that he was there. So I think that for the Raiders, I think there's two spots or two or three positions I think that they could look at with this pick. Somewhere in the secondary, either corner or safety. Or if he falls to them, I think Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah would be a great pick here for them. Because as I said earlier, he is the best coverage linebacker in this class. And the Raiders desperately need help in covering some guys.
Yeah, and they also signed Solomon Thomas, I believe. And they also went out and signed Yannick, like I had mentioned. I think they need to go corner as well. I don't think signing Kenyon Drake. I think that's just a depth piece. They had Theo Riddick and they had Jalen Richard. So that they need another versatile back, and I think Kenyon Drake can provide that for them. I've got a pick, Jeff, and that's a corner position, which I think is a total Mike Mayock pick, and I think it would be awesome. And that's a versatile corner out of Washington, and that's Elijah Molden. And he plays tough, and he has elite vision and his speed, ability to keep up with those elite wide receivers. I think this would be a really, really nice fit for the Raiders. Total Mike Mayock pick. And, a lot of people were surprised that Henry Ruggs went first, which I was too, but if you really think about it, he picked Cleveland. Cleveland Farrell was not the best edge rusher in the draft class in 2019. Total Mike Mayock pick.
Yeah.
And Damon Arnett. Damon Arnett rose
Yeah.
up the boards, but Damon Arnett in the first round, like that. This Elijah Molden, I think has the potential to go in the first round. To go as early as 17, I think this is a total Mike Mayock pick, and I think it could work out too.
Yeah, I think so for sure. I think just in general, they need help in that secondary. Another guy they could potentially look to here is Trayvon Merrick, safety out of TCU.
Yeah.
I think this would be a really interesting pick. Or if they wanted to wait until the second round, they could also take his counterpart, Ardarius Washington out of TCU, who is sort of this combo safety corner position. Because earlier I was listening to the Bootleg Football podcast with Brett Coleman and his running mate. I forget his name. Sorry, it escapes me. But they were talking about these TCU safeties and the secondary in general and how you pretty much have to play a mix of corner and safety, and you really have to know your stuff to get on the field in that TCU secondary. So those TCU guys, they have a lot of experience, a lot of versatility, and I think that Merrick or Washington in the second round would also be some great value for the Raiders.
Yeah, I fully agree.
All right, let's move on then to Miami's second pick here, and that's pick number 18. So moving down to number 6 in the draft, we both think Penei Sewell at number 5, so probably Jamar Chase at number 6. So let's just go with that assumption that they've got their wide receiver position all picked out. So I think that they should go offensive line here. Who are some guys that you would love to see go to Miami at this spot?
So this is I'm not going to disagree, but I've got a different round. I've got linebacker, but we'll stick to offensive line for this pick. I also like Christian Darrisaw here. I've seen a lot of Liam Eichenberg in the first round, which Liam Eichenberg, I think if he goes to the right team, I like the Colts a lot for Liam Eichenberg. As soon as you look at your quarterback in Carson Wentz, who's injury prone, and he was sacked a ton in Philadelphia. So I guess that, but he also doesn't excel as a run blocker. I like Tevin Jenkins a lot here. But if you're talking another area, I really like linebackers, and I think if they need a true linebacker, JOK is perfect here as well.
Yeah, JOK I think would be the perfect fit for them. They just also lost Kyle Van Noy as well to the Patriots. I think
Yeah,
if you
I think I'm sorry.
no,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I yeah, it was Kyle Van Noy. I think I said Andrew Van Ginkel for some reason. I'm sorry. Thank you for correcting that.
No, that's fine. Also, if they wanted to look to if JOK, let's say JOK and Parsons are gone, I'm not sure if the value would be there, but if they still wanted to go linebacker, I think another guy they could look at is Zaven Collins out of Tulsa. He would fill that off-ball linebacker
hmm
role that Kyle Van Noy did for them. 6'4", 260 pounds. Dude's a freak. I think a lot of these linebackers are just a lot of these guys in this draft in general ate their Wheaties. They are some physical specimens. Um, this guy super good in picking up. Pardon me, tickle my throat. Really good open field tackler. Uh, just a really good off-ball linebacker here, and I think if they value him at the spot and they want to replace the hole that Kyle Van Noy leaves with him being gone, they could totally go this route.
Yeah, and the thing with Zaven Collins too, he's 259 pounds. I think he weighed in at his pro day, 6'4". Doesn't have elite speed, but for a 4'6", 740 at 259 pounds, that's pretty darn impressive.
Yeah, the guy is an absolute freak. So then let's go on to pick number 19, that being the Washington football team. They had a pretty interesting offseason. I thought they made what was signing of the offseason or up there with it, I think, with Corey Linsley in picking up Curtis Samuel,
Mm-hmm.
who was former running mate with Terry McLaurin back in Ohio State. And you just pair those two guys up and let them go to work on the outside. Oh, it's perfect. I love it. Anyway, they brought in Ryan Fitzpatrick. I thought that's an interesting sign. I think they're just trying to stay competitive for the division
Yeah.
for this year with that signing, pretty much. I don't think it's anything crazy. It's kind of whatever. So where do you think Washington should go with this pick? Because I think by this point, I think Mac will be gone to the Patriots at 15. So what's a direction they should be looking in here?
So I like that you had mentioned the Fitzpatrick signing. Um, I love it. I love it. And Taylor Heineke, I don't think Taylor Heineke is not their answer. He's not their guy. But he's a very reliable QB2 for right now. And I think right now it seems very unlikely, but and again, anything could happen. Darius had mentioned Justin Fields. to the Washington football team. And we were talking about best fits for him. I think it's the Atlanta Falcons. I think Darius had mentioned that too. David Carr mentioned the New England Patriots, which wouldn't be bad. I like the Falcons better. Darius also mentioned the Washington football team. And I'm mentioning Darius because I don't want to take credit for his statement because I think this is a very, very interesting point to bring up. You're pairing Ohio State wide receiver duos to a former Ohio State wide or quarterback in Justin Fields. That would be perfect. Anything could happen, right? You know, the Chiefs traded up from 27 to 10. I don't see them doing it. I had them reaching a little bit for my wide receiver 5 and Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I think they need to go offensive line here. And I really like Tevin Jenkins here. We had mentioned him. I think he definitely excels as a run blocker, and I think that's, you know, he's probably the best one in this class as a run blocker for tackles.
Yeah, I think line makes sense here. I mean, on the defensive side, they're pretty much set. They could get another linebacker if they wanted to, but I think they have bigger needs. Their defense was awesome last year, as is. I'd seen some people saying even after the Curtis Samuel signing that they should go wide receiver here, which I don't get at all because they also have Chris Humphreys that they signed as well.
And AGG from
Yeah,
Liberty.
and AGG. So I think wide receiver isn't really a need here.
I can see a depth piece later in the draft, but not
Yeah.
here.
I'd seen some people say tight end, but they do have Logan Thomas, and I think Logan Thomas is fine for now. They could potentially, you could start to look at a guy like Pat Freiermuth if you wanted to, but I think the value isn't quite there for a guy like him. So I agree. I think tackle is their best bet. I think a guy like Tevin Jenkins, as you said, would really bring, I think, the energy that this team is looking for. I think the Fitzpatrick signing, I do really like the Fitzpatrick signing as well. He brings that spark, that energy. I think Tevin Jenkins can bring the same in his play. So are we doing 20 next week? Is it 20 through 32 next week? Or
I want to say it's 21 to 32. You want to finish with 20?
32? Let's go with the Bears.
All right, let's end off with the joke of an organization here.
Oh, we love to clown.
Franchise.
Being Packers fans has its perks, and the perks are usually we get to laugh. We get to laugh at teams to the east of us and teams to the south of us. And the team to the south of us is the Chicago Bears. Signing Andy Dalton, they got their guy, obviously, this offseason. So they franchise tagged Allen Robinson. If I'm being honest, I didn't really pay attention to their offseason other than those two guys. I just don't care enough about what they do. Like, they're just kind of there doing their thing. So
they also lost Kyle Fuller from free agency, and I want to say they replaced him with Desmond Trufant.
Yep, Desmond Trufant is on the team now. You're correct in that. So, I mean, quarterback is what everybody talks about with this team, but I think at this point, it's hard to justify them. Like, I really don't know what they could do at pick 20.
I think they're going to go with an offensive piece. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
no, it's fine. I think they need offense as well. Their offense was dismal last year. It was boring to watch them on offense. Not for a Packers fan, but when I was watching them play in other games, I wanted to go to sleep watching their offense play. And that might be because Nick Foles and the MVP, Mr. Trubisky, who's also on the Bills. We probably should have started with that.
Yeah.
But I do think that offense is a spot they should go here.
Because
go ahead.
No, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt you. I thought you were. Yeah.
I think that wide receiver they could go here. You know, a lot of their wide receivers are up in the air with the future. Allen Robinson, they just tagged him. Anthony Miller has been very vocal in the past about his displeasure with the team. And I'm not sure if he'll stick around either. They also have Darnell Mooney, who I think is okay. He could just kind of be there for you. But I do think that wide receiver should be the pick here. And I think that if they could get a guy like Rashad Bateman potentially here if he's available, I think that'd be an interesting pick. I also think that they definitely need line help as well. So I think they could go that route. Potentially, if a guy such as, I don't know, Sam Cosmi is available, somewhere along those lines. I feel like the Bears are in a really tough spot here at pick number 20 because they really need like a game changer on this team. And at this pick, they just can't get it.
Yeah, and like if you look at their defense too, like they adapted very well with Eddie Goldman opting out, and they weren't too deep at the interior D line area. Jalen Johnson, corner out of Utah, really showed out. Um, and I was, could you imagine if the Packers had or if the Bears had not matched that Kyle Fuller offer? We'd have Kyle Fuller and Jair Alexander. We can go more in depth at the 29th pick next week, but
Yeah.
that would just be unreal. But I agree. I think Rashad Bateman, who was my wide receiver too, right behind Jamar Chase. Um, I think that would be a really nice pick. And you had mentioned Anthony Miller. I think they're shopping Anthony Miller too, if I'm not mistaken.
It wouldn't surprise me if they are
Yep.
because he seems like he's pretty much 1 foot in, 1 foot out at this point.
Uh-huh. And Allen Robinson has who knows what his high school quarterback was because his Penn State quarterback was Christian Hackenberg. I feel so bad for Allen Robinson. And, you know, his quarterback at the Jags when they made the AFC title game was Blake Bortles. And then he gets traded to the Bears. And he's got Nick Foles and Mitch Trubisky. And now he's got Andy Dalton. So, and I'm a little bit surprised. Well, the Bears didn't have a choice. They had to tag him.
Yeah.
I would request my release this very moment if I were Allen Robinson. But Allen Robinson's the top 10 wide receiver with garbage quarterbacks throwing him the ball. And, you know, now you've got the MVP of Buffalo, New York, and Mitch Trubisky has the QB2, which means my boy Jake Fromm is moving to QB3. But Rashad Bateman makes a ton of sense here. Can, you know, groom into your wide receiver 2, depending on the future of Allen Robinson, that's your true wide receiver 1 right there. And honestly, you mentioned offensive tackle. I think that makes so much sense. One of their guys is up. I keep forgetting who it is. One of their tackles, he's up after next year. I think it's Charles Leno.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So, you know, a guy like Tevin Jenkins would make so much sense, seeing as, especially with the Bears' run game. I think David Montgomery's good, and it's Tariq Cohen backfield. It's just not. I didn't expect it. Someone else just went to the Bears too. Damian Williams. You know,
Yeah.
the run game isn't great. It's not terrible. I would say it's right. Like I would say it's average. I don't think David Montgomery is as bad as people are putting him out to be. Yes, he was a little bit inconsistent this past season. Tariq Cohen, I think, is an underrated pass catcher in the NFL at the running back position. But if you bring in a guy like Tevin Jenkins, I think that's a really, really nice boost. You can groom into your starting tackle. Or another guy, and a lot of people have praised him for his upside. He's my tackle 4, and that's Jalen Mayfield out of Michigan. He might have limited tape, elite tape to show. He's only 20 because he opted out of the season. And I don't think he came back. I might be wrong on that. I don't think he came back when they decided to have the season again. But you know, those are 3 guys that I'm looking at: Rashad Bateman, Tevin Jenkins, and Jalen Mayfield out of Michigan.
Yeah, and with Tevin Jenkins as well, you know, why not get the ball out of Andy Dalton's hands as much as possible and pound the run game with all those great running backs you have there?
Mm-hmm.
You know, why not? So that's the show. Thank you guys for tuning in. Sam, next week, 21 through 32, correct?
Yes, sir.
Be sure to stay tuned on the lookout for that. If anything else happens, like a crazy Sam Darnold trade or something like that, we'll be sure to talk about it here on the show as we did this week. Make sure you go follow us on all of our socials. Those links will always be down below. I have been Jeffrey Anderson, your host, co-host Sam Daring. Thank you guys so much for listening. We will see you guys on the next episode.